Okay, so this is from thebalancemoney.com. Just a quick sort of definition of what it is. So what it means to lock or float your mortgage rate, how to maintain your buying power before closing. So the current mortgage interest rate is a pivotal factor when you're determining whether to lock or float your rate when you're buying a home. It's a difference between effectively freezing it until closing or gambling that the rate will be lower at the time you close. Interest rates aren't stagnant. So key takeaways here: locking your mortgage rate ensures that your loan's interest rate won't move while you close the deal on a home. Your locked rate can be affected by some factors, including changes to your credit profile or an unexpected home appraisal result. Floating your mortgage rate leaves you susceptible to market conditions, and your interest rate could rise or fall by the time you close the deal on a home. So we'll skip over mortgage rate history, blah, blah, blah. So what's a mortgage rate lock? Locking a mortgage interest rate means that you'll have a rate that won't budge from the time your lender offers it to you until you close on your home loan. It's something of a guarantee. You won't be affected by the increase if mortgage rates rise after you've already locked in your rate. There are some stipulations to a mortgage rate lock, however. You have to close on your mortgage within a predetermined period of time. There can't be any changes or your mortgage application. So mortgage lenders typically offer rate locks for 30, 45, or 60 days, although it's possible that a rate lock with a longer term could be available. Check with your lender about their rate lock options. Fees for rate locks vary by lender, but you'll have to pay more for a longer rate lock term. It can also be costly if you find that you need to extend your rate lock past the original term, and you won't be able to take advantage of a lower rate in most cases if you lock in your mortgage rate and then rates drop. Note, some lenders will offer you an opportunity to receive a lower interest rate than the one you originally locked. This feature is called a float down option. You'll be able to reduce your mortgage rate if mortgage conditions or market conditions cause interest rates to drop during the rate lock term. What affects a mortgage rate lock? A variety of factors can affect a mortgage rate lock, making your interest rate change, according to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. These include you're changing the type of mortgage you're getting or your down payment amount. Your home appraisal came in higher or lower than expected. You applied for new credit or missed a payment on your existing debt, causing your credit score to change. Your lender had trouble documenting your additional income, such as a bonus, overtime, or other pay. What does it mean to float a mortgage rate? A floating mortgage rate is one that's subject to daily market fluctuations. You'll lose some buying power if the interest rate rises by the time you close on your mortgage. You will earn some buying power if the rate falls. Note, choosing to float your mortgage rate is more risky than locking it in because you can't predict with any certainty what mortgage rates you will do from day to day. When does it make sense to float or lock? It might be more advantageous to float your mortgage rate when rates are showing a trend of decreasing from week to week, or at least until you're closer to your closing date. There's a chance that you'll get a better rate than it's time for the loan transaction to take place. You might want to consider a mortgage rate lock in a housing market climate where interest rates are trending higher, provided that you have a concrete timeline from going under contract to your anticipated closing date. It's important to consider how an interest rate change would affect your monthly mortgage payment. And so it goes on, but it adds up, right? $30 turns into $360 over a year's time. That might mean something to you. So it does say discuss your rate lock options with your lender and the terms associated with any rate lock terms they might have available. So we did that, didn't we?
Absolutely.
With one of our lenders. Yeah.
Yeah. So super important. We saw that big fluctuation in rates. Understanding what that means, what your options are, can really matter to you as a buyer. Also understanding. Look, I think my interpretation of most good lenders, one of the first things they do. First off, one little step back. You cannot lock your rate until you have a fully accepted offer. Okay, so whatever you're getting quoted, when you're applying for rates, you can compare lenders. They can tell you what the rate is that day. That's all they can do. And be aware, if you choose a lender one day and say, what's your rate? And you call another lender 4 or 5 days later, you should call back the first one. Get their rates the same day. Okay, because they change, as you mentioned, day to day, as we continually show at the opening of our live stream here. Every day they'll adjust. So you can only lock when you have a fully executed contract, and no matter what you've been pre-approved for. Sometimes something to be aware of is, look, we've had people who may have been locked in at 6.5% and been looking for a property for 6 months. All of a sudden they get an acceptance and rates are 7.5%. They no longer qualify for the same loan. So if it's been a while since you've been approved and rates have been moving a lot, you probably need to check in with the lender periodically. And I know if it's a lender that we refer to you, we're doing that on your behalf as well. But as a buyer, that's something to always be aware of. So let's assume you have an acceptance. First conversation with your lender, here's the fully executed contract. I need to get started with this loan. Where are rates at? They might say, and I think they can reasonably predict from one day to the next. Maybe if it's in the afternoon, they can say, hey, I think rates are going to go down tomorrow. Maybe we lock it in tomorrow. Or there's a trend over the next few days. But typically you're talking about locking your rate immediately so that a lender can proceed with preparing all the paperwork to get your loan fully approved at that point. So what happens if you lock your rate and then all of a sudden rates go down?
Yeah.
There's a float down option. So the great thing about, I believe, all lenders is that once you lock, your rate's not going up. I don't care where rates go. That's locked in for a period of time, as you mentioned. Okay. But if it goes down, most of them will offer some variation of a float down. Okay. First off, typically it has to move at least a quarter point. I've heard that pretty consistently from most lenders. And what I've also heard fairly consistently is that maybe they'll split the difference. So if the rates go from 7.25 down to 7 after you've locked in at 7.25, then what they're going to do is they're going to offer you a one-time float down to 7.125 at no cost to you. They will move it down 1/8 of a point. If you wait, let's say you don't do that, and a week later it's now 6.75. Well, it's moved down 0.5 point. So now they'll give you a one-time float down to 7%. You're going to get a quarter point of that. You're going to get half of that typically. Okay. It is a conversation to have with your lender in the process of getting approved. Understand what their policies are and be aware of that. A good lender is trying to stay on top of that for you, but also as a buyer, you should be aware of these options. One of the scariest things to do is not to lock at all, because you can eliminate your ability to purchase that property if rates do spike up, and maybe you're right at the cap, and all of a sudden you no longer qualify to purchase that property. So typically locking your rate very quickly is the best thing to do, and if it goes down, it can float down. Okay?
Got it.
Small thing, but super important for buyers to understand in this volatile rate environment.